All right. Apologize for those on the internet this evening. Hit Facebook. There you go. Thank you for being with us tonight. Um, I notice you see my hat, and I know you probably don't like the hat, but you would like my hair a whole lot worse. Okay. So I didn't get a bath today, this morning. Had to leave early going to Warland, and so you see me in my raw condition. So get used to it. No, I'm sorry if you're offended by it. I hope your hat doesn't offend you in any way. But we're glad you're with us tonight. I pray that God will bless you in our study tonight as we're going to continue in the study of humility. As we talked last week, humility is really the beginnings of our place in submission, in the first step of your process that we've been looking at for a long time now. And so until we get to a state of humility, we're really incapable of being submissive to Him, and or at least to a level that we can have productivity or usefulness for Him in our lives. So the humility is, as we saw last week, we discussed that to a fairly high level, and we're going to continue there tonight. If you want to go on to Luke, Luke, the 22nd chapter this evening. And I'd wrote down, this is a study I did back on 5/19 of 19, about a year ago, a little less than a year ago. I wrote down at the top, there can be no surer proof of pride than a belief that one is sufficiently humble. Uh, so I don't know if you remember that when I quoted you that, but there's no sure, pride is the opposite of humility, and pride is one of the original sins of man, where he believes that he can do it on his own. Believe that, he don't need God. He can do it his way, and so forth. This is the strides of pride. So there's no surer proof of pride than a belief that one is sufficiently humble, or I'm humble enough already. In other words, so there is a place to begin humility, but there's probably no bottom to it or no top to humility, as we will work the remainder of our days to find the humility that Christ desires for us to have. And so in Luke 22:24, we'll see here where Jesus is talking about they'd had a dispute among the disciples as to in verse 24 as who is the greatest. Uh, we've had that on a basketball court before. Who's the best player? Who can shoot the longest? And competitive nature of all men, especially men, are very competitive. Women sometimes are not quite as competitive, but sometimes they can be quite competitive as well. But the disciples were having an argument over who is the greatest, and I don't know that it matters what they were talking, whether it was in jest or whether it was in reality. They had other discussions at other times where, where moms were wanting, because they did see that Christ was something very special, and that they were wanting one to sit to the right and one to the left of Christ and so forth. And mothers requested such, and created quite a stir. So here, at least in this place, they were discussing the greatness of each other. And in verse 25, Jesus said to them, the kings of the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and those who exercise authority over them are called benefactors. But not so among you. On the contrary, He who is greatest among you, let him be as the younger, and he who governs as he who serves. For who is greater, he who sits at the table or he who serves? Is it not he who sits at the table? Yet I am among you as the one who, what? Serves. So within the world's perspective, obviously, um, the one who sits at the table has a higher standing, per se, than the one who serves, right? That would be, it's very common to actually go to a restaurant today, and not that me or you see them any differently. It's not the person, it's the position, okay? One who is paying, in other words, as a server, you're earning from those sitting at the table. And so that gives you lesser standing, I guess you might say, from a worldly perspective. And Jesus is saying to them that is a common view of standing in our world. And we understand that and know that. And we understand we have an upper class. We have even the government puts us in categories: the middle class and lower class. Okay, then the minority class and this class and that class. And so all that means something. I get that, and it has designations as to what it means. But in reality, it is exactly where we get these ideas in our minds that there's those who are better than others, or greater than others. Sometimes we feel lesser than others, and sometimes we feel like we might be better than others in our pridefulness and so forth. So, but here Jesus is dealing with that, and from the spiritual perspective, or from the godly perspective, or from Jesus' perspective, he is saying to you that in contrary to that kind of thinking, he says, let the younger, as used to be a time in this world when the older were respected for their age, almost for no other reason, to be honest with you. If they were older, they were respected by the younger. That was a very common practice in the world, and especially in the South where I was raised and so forth. There was a certain respect given for the older of our community. And there's various reasons for that. Obviously, they've lived longer. They have hopefully a little wisdom that they've gained and so forth. And they're somewhat, in some cases, more fragile. You can't knock them down to go get to the front of the line like you might do your cousin or your friend, as y'all fight over who gets to be first. So you yield yourself to that and so forth. So, but in the world, and Jesus mentions that, but he says the opposite. He says here the younger, or the one who is so-called less deserved, or the one who governs, is below those who serves. And so, in other words, he is putting the burden of first in the place of the server, the one who is willing to serve. Okay, so you can see the characterization of humility there, to where you're greater in service than you are in position. Okay, even though service is a position, I guess you might say, but a higher position. Last week, you remember we talked about sitting the place at the table and which position or where you sit at the table. He said to sit in the least position, and if the master wants you to have a better position, he will ask you to move to that position instead of you being in the desired position and being asked to move down, which would be quite embarrassing, I guess, from any perspective going forward. So Jesus is saying unto you that I want to teach you. I'm trying to help you to recognize the greatness of the servant, and the fact that even though I am not seen as great, Jesus at the time obviously was not seen as so great. He was actually crucified on a cross, right? and died for the sins and was hated by man in many ways, yet he was one of the greatest servant of all. And me and you, in our walk with Christ, if we're servants, you will not be recognized. Very often will you be recognized for your service. Okay, you're going to be overlooked. You're not going to be seen, and in many cases, you're going to be the enemy because because of your service, you intimidate those who want to have high standing in this world, and they're trying to figure out how to have the high standing, and you in your service role are receiving that of which they would like to have, and it hurts their pride to know that you're receiving in your service what they desire, and their will and their want to be great in this world. I've noticed that it used to be, I think, more popular, but even so today, you go scanning a football field and everybody's playing in the camera. Everybody's just normal, acting like fans, and all of a sudden here comes the camera and it sweeps by and everybody goes crazy, you know. I want you to make sure you see me, camera, as you pass by, you know. So everybody wants to be seen, and I think it's in many ways. I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but it's a natural thing, and the world is about that. And we look at the greatest of baseball players and football players and this player and that player, and we, as kids, we play our game and pitch up the ball and hit the ball for the home run that won the World Series or whatever it might have been. And we keep hitting that ball or that rock, whatever it is, until we get one that looks like it might be a winner. And then we attach to it, well, that was the one that won the World Series, because we do not always hit them straight as we'd like. But Jesus is trying to help us to recognize that service should be a goal. And some would say that doesn't seem like a very good goal, or a goal of any magnitude. You try it someday. Try it as you learn to serve others. It's not an easy way to go. It's a hard way in many ways, and you can be taken advantage of. And you're not unwilling to be done that way. Okay. One of the hardest parts of being a servant is that people will take advantage of you, and they will use you for their own purposes. And you can get angry if you want to, and you can stop being a servant because it's too painful to go through. Or you can recognize that there's going to be some of that in this world, and you recognize that it's just a part of it. It's been a hard lesson for me as well. I've drove many a time 30 miles into town to meet with somebody, and then they don't show up. Many times. Many times. Set up a meeting, want to talk, this or that, I've got to where it doesn't. Karen now, she'll follow up and try to run them down and verify that they're going to be there, and that's good. I like that, but it's just something that you know is probably going to happen quite often. Is at the moment they're needing you, they've forgotten about what they needed. It's 3 or 4 days later, their mind is somewhere else, and their troubles are not on the meeting that they set up with you. And so, you're insignificant in some ways when you're treated that way, if you want to take it that way. Or you can recognize that this person is struggling in their lives, and they're having a hard time focusing, and they are struggling in a state of confusion in many cases and a lack of order, and you just didn't come up in their thinking process on that day. Set up another meeting and go for it again is usually what you'll end up doing. So to be a servant, you learn to be at service to people who are in need. And there's a certain level of patience that comes with that. And without the love of God in you for them, you can't do this. It's impossible to do it. And so love being one of the gifts of the Spirit, okay, or one of the fruits of the Spirit, or the fruit of the Spirit. Love being so vitally important for you being able to serve and serve generously in this world. And most of you, or many of you probably have served to some level. There's a certain amount of satisfaction that God gives you when you have served someone. I don't know exactly, it's not monetary, I can assure you of that, but it is an inner feeling or inner peace that comes with knowing that you were there for them in that particular place. At least there was a place of a word. And I think another thing that many of you kind of want to quantify your service and want to be able to define it per se in your life. And I will say to you that it comes in mysterious ways. And it might be just one moment of time to where you get the opportunity to serve a particular person. And you might only get one chance. It's not like you're taking on a job of service and they come to you because you're in the service business. You're living life and you have an opportunity that comes your way just for a moment to be a servant for that person. One chance, one time, one moment of time in life, and you have the chance to be a servant or not. And sometimes we miss them. We're too busy with the things of life and so forth. We undervalue the power of being a servant. We see many other things more important in life, and we miss so many opportunities to serve. And there's actually very few that are willing to serve in our world. And serve is one of those service that he's describing is I'm really receiving nothing in return. And this is a key factor to true servanthood, is there's absolutely nothing in return here. It's true service. There's many who do things for people with at least the expectation that it will come around and be a positive in their world. He might be an important person. He might be this. Just the fact that I was there for that moment might lead to something. That's not true servanthood. You know, that's manipulating in reality, and you're trying to use it for your benefit or for your good, and there's no concept of service there. Okay, now it's a mental service can certainly be your spiritual attitude toward it, as much as it is the act itself of what you're doing for someone. So you have to develop it. I think it's a gift as well. I truly believe that service is a gift from God, and he really does enable certain people to be better, more equipped, spiritually speaking, for service than others. And so, and we've done the study of the gifts of the Spirit. And at times, it's been a while. I think you might have done it just lately, didn't you, Levi? Yeah, to where everybody kind of understood and one of those was service, or being a servant or being good at it. And those that can truly love people, wherever you find them, and being able to love them and help them at their place, makes a very good servant of God. Jesus was obviously the best. He had the highest position and became the lowest in life to prove a point, not to let you know how big of a servant he was, but to show you that he was willing to go to the lowest place to meet you there in that place. And a true servant will go from the highest point of king or queen to the lowest place of servant to minister to someone in that place. So let's go, if you will, to 1 Peter. Any questions on servanthood in that position or that place that you might just want an answer to? I don't know that I can answer it, but I'll certainly give it a shot. 1 Peter 5. Here's what we kind of talked about a little bit earlier about and this is probably where many people found the idea that to submit yourselves to your elders. 1 Peter 5:5. Likewise, you younger people, submit yourselves to your elders. Yes, all of you be submissive to one another and be clothed with humility. For God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Therefore, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time, casting all your cares upon him, for he cares for you. So he begins in verse 5 by describing the relationship between the younger and the older. And we really certainly have a problem with that in our world today. I have seen a lot of arrogance from young people toward elder people in our world today. They think they're old and stupid and don't seem to have an understanding of them or where they are, like they never lived through those days in their lives. It's very disrespectful for any of us to have that toward younger or older or anyone else. He goes on to say, submit yourselves, be submissive to one another. So as we talk about submission in the process toward God, he's also saying very clearly, be submissive to each other. It's very important. Now, obviously within a relationship between a man and a woman, husband and a wife, for surely that's an important aspect of a relationship, right? We submit ourselves to each other to try to work together in common goals and purposes. And in the same way, between those in Christ and those of the world, we find ourselves being arrogant at times with each other, and we're far from submissive to one another. In other words, be willing to clothe yourself with humility. And the reason, very clearly, it gives us, it certainly improves relationships. There's no doubt about that, between us and God and between us and others when we're submissive to each other, not overpowering, demanding. It's always my way or no way or the highway, that sort of thinking. You don't know what you're doing. I know where we're going and what we're doing and so forth. Those are acts of arrogance and immaturity, and it's very difficult to maintain relationships in this world with those sorts of attitudes. A submissive spirit is one who looks out for the needs of others as much or more than themselves. And that's a key. And I've used the chicken on the plate before. You know, everybody's going for when the chickens used to, everybody ate together and so forth. I know it doesn't happen much anymore, but the chickens sit in the middle of the table and everybody has their eye on that one piece that everybody, and it's amazing how all their eyes go to that one piece, and everybody, no matter how many pieces of chicken are on that platter, it's one piece that stands out, and everybody, especially the guys, that's the piece they want. And some say, well, maybe I'll wait and see if it's still there, or do I go ahead and get it first? Well, that's usually the decision, and everybody goes for it at once, and there's 3 or 4 forks in one piece of chicken, right? And so the submissive one is the one who is willing to go without to let someone else have a piece of chicken. You know what I'm saying? It's very foreign to most. In the world we live in the cutthroatness of life, everybody's out for his own. That certainly is not a very common spirit in our world today. So be submissive to younger people, be submissive to your elders, and be submissive to one another. Clothe yourself with humility. Why? God resists the proud. Now, what does that say to you? God resists the proud. Why would he resist the proud? Y'all have okay. In other words, really, pride is really, in some ways, becomes a god in and of itself. In other words, you are somewhat of a god of your own self. If pride is large enough, it doesn't take a lot to be there, and you see yourself more important than anyone around you. And sometimes when we say it that way, we resist the thought of that. But the reality of life is that in many cases, that's exactly the way we live. And one of the struggles that we have in a ministry like this is getting you guys or you guys on the internet to be willing to do what you don't want to do. God is trying to help you go from where you are to where he wants you to be. And that roadway is going through places that you don't want to go and doing things that you don't want to do, or at least you don't think you do. Many of God's plans is carrying you to places that you've never been before. And some of you instantaneously say, well, I don't want to go. I'm fearful of that. I've never been there before. I don't know what it's like. I don't want to try that. I'm uncomfortable with doing that, as some would say. And on it might go. And so what happens so many times is that God is trying to help you to overcome your own pride. In other words, because you could fail. And many of us don't want to do that. We wouldn't want to be seen as failing in front of someone else. I want to know whether I'm going to win or lose or not. That's pride at work. God resists those who have or think they're in control of their lives and the things of their world. In the times like these that we're in now, and with the virus and all that's going on, and even the possibility of losing life, losing jobs and so forth, possibly losing houses and all the things that could happen, the failing of our country. Who knows where this might go and what it might end up being looking like. We could be in a depression for 15, 20 years. So that the possibilities are real, without a doubt. And so are you proud? Are we proud enough? Are we willing to submit ourselves to God and say, Lord, I need you. I truly need you during these times. I'm willing to submit myself to you. I do not know the direction we're going and how we're going to get there, but I trust that you have a plan for me, that we will make it and do well. He resists those who seemingly don't need him. That makes sense. We've lived our lives like we don't need him for most of our lives. That's a very proud stance. As we've seen this lately, pride just goes so far. Once the legs are cut out from under your stool, you begin to fall, and you're not in control. And you thought you were. And before you know it, you have nothing. And that's what happens when we go it alone and leave God out of our lives. And that's exactly why I believe we're struggling in America today, is because we've done much of that. So he resists that. He resists those who are proud. He resists a nation, as I talked about the other week. America is arrogant. Arrogance being the opposite of humility, and goes right along with being proud. But gives grace to the humble. Grace being, what is grace? Unmerited favor. A judgment deserved but not given. You have earned it. You've earned the right to be convicted, but yet your judge says, I give you grace. I give you a gift. As we talk about those who are considering salvation and need Christ in their heart, many of them want to earn it or deserve it in some way feel like they deserve to have what God is offering them. Jesus says it's a gift. God says it's a gift. You can't earn it. You only can receive it. And he was willing to give it to you as a gift if you're willing to take it. So that's grace. Its grace is given to those who are humble. And the brokenness of man is a beautiful thing to see. Now, sometimes to the world it looks like they're poor and ignorant and blind, or they're weak, but they've come to a place in their life to where they see that they're nothing without Him, and they're willing to humble themselves to that place. They're broken. They're broken to a place to where God can take them and pick them up and heal them and make them whole again. And the ones who seem to be willing to be humble in our day are those who are the most broken in many cases. The ones that truly have tried and failed and have fallen short. And they're seeking a relationship or a way to help them do better, and that will be Christ. And those who are humble are willing to do it His way without argument. And so they, in verse 6, so they humble themselves under what? The mighty hand of God. So humility really begins with, are you willing to be obedient to Him? Are you willing to be obedient to God? It's a key, it's foundational, it's law. It's law within the power of God. Obedience is an absolute necessity for all that God is trying to do. Why America and why the world is in the place it's in right now is through disobedience, without a doubt in my mind. It is through disobedience do we find ourselves in this pandemic. It is absolutely tied directly to disobedience around the world and America and the hearts and minds of each of us. And God said, if you will humble yourselves and pray, seek my face, I will what? Heal your land. Who? My people, he says. My people. Those who love him. Folks, let me tell you, he has a plan and a kingdom designed for those who love him. He knows the world is not going his way. He loves the world, but he has not planned for them. He is going to work through his people, and the people of the world will be a benefactor of what happens for the children of God. Now, I know that sounds arrogant in some ways. It's just an absolute truth. God blesses the world because of his people who are here, and those who are faithful unto him. He blesses the world through his children. And the power of God is transmitted through you and through me to this world. Okay? Now, we're sharing in many cases the word. We're also sharing in the service of God. In other words, when we respond in service to others, we are giving a hand of Christ to them. See? They're seeing who Christ was and is. Because inside of you, you're sharing that to them. That is the way Christ has chosen it to be. He began his church, which we are a very small part of his church, the body of Christ. And why was the church started? To carry on after Jesus left. He left us with the Holy Spirit of God, but he left it for us to do. And God works through you and through me to accomplish his goals. And he needs a humble, pliable servant that is willing to be used of God. One who basically says, thy will be done, not mine. Jesus said those very words. And he is looking for those who are willing to do that. Most of us are very strong-willed in our thinking, and we want to do it our way. We want to do your work, Lord, but we want to do it our way. That's why there's so many failed ministries around our country and around our world. Now, they're raising money and they're feeding mouths around the world, whatever they might be doing, and some of it's very good, but are they bearing real fruit for the kingdom of God? Yeah, maybe not. Maybe not. Why wouldn't they be bearing fruit? Because they're doing it their way instead of God's way. Okay. The hard way, I really believe, is a ministry like this. I really do. And I'm not here to brag on us by any means, because I certainly don't see a lot that other than God is certainly doing some things here in a special way in some lives. But what I'm saying to you is that it's not an easy way, and it's not a desirable way, and the world is not flocking to us wanting to be a part of a way like this. This is a dirty business, in a sense that you're down and dirty in the gutters of life, in the dark places of life, trying to help people get to a better place. And many people don't desire that whatsoever. And they struggle with that, and only a few are called to that. And I get that. God calls those who are a part of a service or a ministry like this. And it's a special calling because it's hard. It's very difficult. And it takes very humble people, I believe, to do well in a business like this, because it's a tough, non-rewarding type business in many ways from the worldly perspective. So humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God. In other words, be willing to do his word and not argue with it, recognizing the power of his hand, knowing that what you're doing is coming through his strength and his power. You're a servant. You're just dishing out the medicine of Christ, the medicine of the word, and that the exalting of your life comes in due time, if it comes at all. It'll come under the mighty hand of God as well. You will work with little pay, okay? You will be a part of a greater than you ministry, obviously, but there is the exalting. The measure of fruit is sometimes very difficult to see and to recognize. The world is certainly not your friend in those areas, and they see us all as weak and needy folks, and they're not impressed. The world is not with what God is doing in service around the world. So find yourself there. It'll be the places that nobody pays attention to. It'll be the small and the down and out, and those who are ministering in ways that are not noticed by the world. That through the mighty hand of God. That you'll be exalted in due time will probably come in the day you meet him. In heaven might be your only exaltation when he says, good and faithful servant. Okay? Might be the only thing you're working for, is to someday hear him say that. Thou good and faithful servant. There's nothing better that will ever be said to you in this world than those words. Nothing ever will be better. You can get all the rings of the Super Bowls. You can be the president of all presidents. You can have made all the money in the world. You can be the greatest of greatest of greatest of everything. But none of them will match thou good and faithful servant of God. I truly will tell you unequivocally that is the greatest compliment you will ever receive as a child of God from him. So work toward that. It is a very difficult challenge. You will not find it come easy, and it will require your lifelong experience to get there. Obedience to him in a humble spirit, staying dedicated and focused toward the call, and to maintain a level of service toward those around you with a spirit of love that is powerful, that never changes unconditionally. You're working toward the goal. You're not working for yourself, you're working for him. You never lose sight of that. No matter how far a ministry like this goes or how far a church goes, it's all under the leadership of Christ. And we never can lose sight of that. My will, it has nothing to do with it. It's truly the leadership of Christ in our hearts that will carry us together toward that place or that goal. Okay, in service. And I think the drawing of a church will be in the area of service. Do you love each other? Do you show that? When people come and visit here, do they feel welcomed and a part here? And you can't fake that. You can't, have this spiel that you learned in seminary of how to greet people and tell them, these words and glad you came and so forth. It's either real or it's not. It either comes from the power of God in you and the love of God in you, or it does not. It's even the novice of our world recognize the reality and truth of real. What is real? And I know there's a lot of fake in our world today, and a lot of things going on. But God is going to bless those who are willing to be humble in their presentation of life. And you cannot truly hide that humility. It is an obvious flaw, as the world would proclaim, that you have. You have a spirit of humility. The world would see that as a flaw. He's weak in nature. He's a good old boy, but he's got a weak nature about him. And he just really lacks this or that, whatever they might want to say about the one who is truly humble in spirit. But for those in the spiritual realm, they recognize that that person is a great warrior for Christ because he's willing to fight the fight. He's a warrior that's going to fight the war or the battle that God puts before him and be willing to win that battle or stay the course until the end. Okay? Any comments tonight on the power of humility? I wish we were full tonight with all of you that's not here tonight that are at home. Hopefully very soon we'll find our way back to that place and when God allows that to happen, and we're looking forward to that. You have a good evening. Thank you.